Good morning, Genesis Family Chiropractic, Noblesville and Hamilton County. This is Dr. Brian McCarley with Doc About Town, episode 22, I believe it is. We're up to now. And I'm here this morning with my buddy Rob. Good morning, Rob. Thanks for being here with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
He actually opted out of coffee this morning, which is blowing me away. But so I've got my steaming cup here, so I'll take a sip on that every once in a while. Let me tell you a little bit about Rob. Rob and I have known each other for about, gosh, it's going on 5 years now, isn't it? It's getting close to that.
Yeah.
We actually met because our wives were in a Bible study group together, and we affectionately refer to them collectively as the Michelles, because they're both named Michelle, obviously. And they both thought, we got to get our husbands together. They really hit it off, and they were right. I think we hit it off pretty well. So, Rob is it's not area director anymore, you're regional director now, right? With an organization called Man in the Mirror Ministries. And Man in the Mirror is pretty much what it sounds like. It is a ministry that reaches out and helps to develop men for Christ, to become better followers of Christ, better men, better husbands, better fathers, better just members of our community. But the key is the discipleship component.
Yeah.
And you are kind of classified as what, a domestic
missionary,
is that right?
Local
okay.
missionary.
Local missionary?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of turn it over to Rob here because he's got kind of an interesting story, and Man in the Mirror's got a really interesting approach to how they do things. But we're just going to talk a little bit about that, about Man in the Mirror, and how you might be affected by them and not even know it, or how you might be able to get involved if that's necessary. So, Rob, you and I have talked a lot, and I know your story, but you have an interesting path that you followed to kind of come to Man in the Mirror. Tell us a little bit about the backstory there.
So how far back?
Well,
how far back do you want me to go?
Well, two half cells came together. No, I wouldn't have to go that far back, but.
So I would say my calling into ministry has been an ongoing thing for years and years and years. Not specifically to Man in the Mirror, but God just built an interesting story into my life, and as I started with Man in the Mirror and got to reflecting on my life, just the interesting story really tied in well with men's discipleship. So that's, as I've said before, we're a one-trick pony. That's what we deal with, is men's discipleship. But I got called, then I'll tell you, I guess, the short version of my story. So, an unengaged dad. My dad and I have a stronger relationship now, but for growing up, he was physically present, but not engaged in my life and the lives of my sisters. All three of my sisters have been in abusive relationships, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, which impacted me. My mom's dad committed suicide when I was in 4th grade, and watching her go through that, and then my grandma deal with the emotional toll of that, and us as kids having to deal with that. And as I look back, I've always had a heart for kids and for women, and wanting better for them. And so as I look through these things and think about, how do I tie in? How do I solve these problems? Well, the one way to do that is to work on a man's heart, because men fail every day. We don't wake up meaning to fail, but we do, unfortunately. And
we don't ever want to admit that, though.
No, we never want to admit it.
No. We got this, right? We got this.
But morally, if you look at society today, men have failed, unfortunately. And so for me to help out with women and children and for them not to have the same path or past that I've had, the way to help solve that problem is to get in a man's heart, to change his heart. And as you said earlier, once a guy starts living out of his relationship with Christ, you have better husbands, better fathers, and better leaders. And so that helps to stem the tide or solve the problem of women and children.
Yeah.
So.
You and I have spent a lot of time together over especially the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob and I serve on the men's lead team at our church, at White River Christian Church here in Noblesville. And so because of that, serving on that lead team, we've spent a lot of time working together. And I'm an analogy guy, and you talked about this, and we've talked about helping men be better, and by helping men be better, now the family is better, now the church is better, the community is better, everything's better. And I liken it to the old Papa John's approach and the better ingredients, better pizza. You improve one ingredient, and especially one that's as influential as the man in the relationship in the family.
Yeah.
Everything just gets better.
Yeah.
And so So tell us a little bit about what the story is behind Man in the Mirror. Then I know Pat Morley's been in ministry a long time.
30 plus years.
Yeah. What year did he write Man in the Mirror?
It was the late '80s.
Yeah. So that book's been around a long time.
Well, so it was around. Yeah, and for a man's book, right? It initially came out with a pink cover, and you're like,
yeah, that's not good marketing.
Anyway, we've done a few years ago, he had the 25th anniversary edition, so he rewrote it.
Yeah, was it camouflage at that time?
No, but it was much more manly than a pink cover, so. But no, so, Pat, Pat kind of had one foot in the church and one foot out of the church, so to speak, for a very long time. We would call them cultural Christians, guys who haven't, or people who haven't really made a true profession to Christ and are living that way. He was kind of trying to play the game,
So they go to church, they show up, they sit in the pew, they're not really engaged.
Yeah.
Maybe they show up on Christmas and Easter, but sometimes more than that, but they're just not really engaged, not really active in discipleship or growing their faith.
Yeah, I would say their life focus is still more centered towards them instead of God first. It's them and then sprinkling a little God.
Okay.
So his wife,
just for good measure.
Yeah, for good measure. So his wife, Patsy, actually led him to the Lord at one point, and then his father-in-law became his mentor or discipler for many years. But Pat has always had a passion for guys that are kind of in that category, cultural Christians, as we call them. And so he started a Bible study way back in the 80s, pre the Man in the Mirror book. They met in a bar outside of Orlando, Florida.
Okay.
That Bible study still meets today, 30-some years later, not in a bar. They moved to the Civic Center. But
they outgrew the bar, didn't they?
Outgrew the bar. But seriously, every Friday morning, if it's not Pat teaching it, it's our president, Brett Clemmer. But it's been going on for 30 plus years now. And so the book, The Man in the Mirror, came out of that. Pat's kind of, here's some things I struggled with for years and years and years. And here's what God has to say about those things. So it's a very relatable book. And then the ministry just kind of grew out of that. The book started to sell, and Pat realized that, hey, there's really a need, for spiritual maturity.
Sure.
And we're lacking in that, but it starts here, and so that's kind of the genesis of it.
And then a few years ago, and this is kind of really where we got engaged with our lead team with White River. There's an interesting story about how the No Man Left Behind model came about, and I remember hearing it when we went to training. Tell us a little bit about that, because I love that Pat has the Bible study that's still been going for all these years, but he found a way to kind of replicate that, didn't he?
Yeah.
So tell us about that backstory a little bit. Something about a master's degree I don't remember all the details, but it's a really fascinating story.
Well, I'm not sure totally what you're getting at. There's
maybe I'm mixing two stories, but
that might be. So the backstory with Man in the Mirror, No Man Left Behind. So that's kind of been our bread and butter, if you will. It's an intentional discipleship process. It's not a program. It's not a curriculum. It's like a theory, a working theory, a model, but gleaned out of our thousands and thousands of churches that we've worked with over the years. And so we started to see some patterns on churches that were doing things well, and their men were being discipled and going down that road and growing deeper in Christ, and better marriages, better families. So they took all these best practices. We didn't create the model. We just kind of assembled best practices. And so once we got this book done, we intentionally had a bunch of churches try it out. We wanted to see, are we on track? Beta testers. Are we on track? Is this the right thing? And so 129 churches over a 2.5-year period intentionally implemented the model. Those churches saw on average a 48% increase in the number of men coming to church, and then an 84% increase in the number of men involved in some form of discipleship outside of Sunday service. So they got the information back, and you're a statistics guy.
Right.
They didn't. So they were like, this is crazy, ridiculous. This can't be true. So they sent it off to a college. I don't remember which college it was, to their statistics department, and they went through it, and they're like, no, you're absolutely spot on. This is true. This is true.
That must be what I was hearing. Maybe what the master's degree was. But they actually did. Did the statistical analysis on it and found that it's dead on.
Yeah.
That's
but again,
awesome.
it's not a program. It's not a curriculum. Too many churches, I think, get wound up in the program. What's the next big program? What's the next best program? and they end up doing this the whole time. And this is an intentional process. It's it should be the foundational piece of discipleship, right?
Sure.
And everything you do as a church should be wrapped around discipleship for both men and women, not just men. We just focus on men.
That's kind of the cool part about it for me is I've enjoyed watching that is that as we learn the process, and of course we're studying it as our lead team, and we're getting better at it,
Yeah.
working to implement the principles of the model in our church for reaching more men and reaching men on a deeper level and connecting guys to guys too. That's the part of it too that I think sometimes get lost. It's not just about connecting guys to Jesus, but it's about connecting guys to guys in that sense too.
Right.
But it's called no man left behind, but the principles are the same.
Yeah.
There's almost nothing. In fact, there's nothing in there that I've come across that that's exclusively for men. No, that it works for women too.
Works for women, works for kids. It could be no woman left behind, no child left behind.
Yeah, let's
Not akin to George Bush and his policies, but yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
So
That's really
again,
cool.
that's why it's just a theory. I mean, it's a practical application, intentional process.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's the last 3 years especially, I've really enjoyed learning that. And I'm a student anyway. I love to just learn.
Yeah.
I think for me the coolest thing about No Man Left Behind is not only that it can be implemented for anybody, not just men, but it really I think speaks to men because it's a process.
Yeah.
It's foundational steps, but it's measurable too.
Mm-hmm.
And not all guys are wired that way. I get that, but a lot of us are. You know, a lot of us are like, okay, what am I going to do, and how do I know when I've succeeded?
Right.
How do I know I'm improving? And this is a very measurable process.
Totally
And
measurable, yeah.
Yeah, it's really been cool. I know we've seen a lot of cool things happen at White River since we started doing this
Totally,
process.
yeah.
And we're just barely
Hopefully
getting
more,
started at 3
yes,
years.
More to come. Yeah.
I think that may be one of the intimidating things about it. I think maybe for some people, and I know we've had some guys on our lead team who've been a little reticent about that, is that you're talking an 8 to 10 year process.
Totally.
And it doesn't have to be the same guys involved in running the process for 8 to 10 years, but it takes time to build that foundation. You're building a strong house. You're not throwing up one of these tiny houses.
Well, to that point, so I had a conversation with a men's leader from another church that I'm working with yesterday, and we talked about that very thing. You know, he said, look, we've been doing this for about 4 years now, and man, how do you break through? He said, I know there's a tipping point, you know, but we've got so many men, and so many men feel like they're not engaged in the men's stuff at our church. Mm-hmm. And when does that start to rock back the other way? You know, and he said, we're making good steps, but it's an 8 to 10 year process, you know, to really change the paradigm, to get that fabric interwoven foundationally, that everything we do is you know, built on a discipleship process.
Right.
But it takes a while because you're breaking the old paradigms. You're trying to, you know, infiltrate culture, if you will, and change that. And it's just discipleship isn't a quick and clean process. It's messy. It's dirty. It takes a while. So yeah. But it is a long process. So, you know, to that guy, I just said, stay encouraged. Keep casting vision. You know, keep leading your men well. Keep your leadership team moving forward. And so, same with White River. That's what we're.
You sure you're not talking about the conversation that we had?
But
That sounds a
not
lot
yesterday.
like the conversation you
Not
had. Not
yesterday.
yesterday. No, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. I just want to make sure people know about what you're doing. And how many churches do you work with?
Oh goodness, over the years, so I've been doing this full time now for 8 years, just about. And over the course of that time, I've worked with, in some capacity or another, 150, 200 churches. On a very deep level, more like 30 to 40. And then churches that have really taken a hold and gotten the ball moving down the field really well, you know, that's probably in the 15 range.
Okay.
So, you know, quantifiably a lot of churches, but very deep, it tends to narrow. And
Sure.
guys leave the church, leaders change, pastors leave, so then you got to start over sometimes, you know, and we've done that a few times too. But yeah, so lots of different
That's wild.
churches. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know why this never dawned on me before, but just when you said that you've been doing this full time for 8 years, you're just now in that process long enough to be able to begin seeing some of those churches come to full maturity of that 8 to 10 year process.
Ish. Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. So getting buy-in initially,
Yeah.
you know, because we're a ministry, we've been around for so long, but a lot of pastors, a lot of church staff view us as just a vendor too, because we have many resources from it. But again, like I said earlier, our bread and butter is this process, you know, so we're not out trying to push materials all the time, but hey, an intentional discipleship process. And a lot of the churches, it takes time to develop that relationship with them. So, you know, a year to 2 to 3 years of developing a relationship to get that trust, that buy-in, to say, okay, yeah, let's run with this now. And so, yeah, there are churches that have progressed further.
Sure.
And a few that are kind of on the end of really deep, but
Right.
but not many yet.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're getting there.
We're definitely not there.
Yeah.
White River's definitely,
We're getting there.
we're working on it.
Yeah.
So, well, that's cool. Any final words here you want to talk about with Man in the Mirror or No Man Left Behind or men's discipleship in general? Anything else that we didn't cover that you thought, hey, this is probably good to add?
Yeah, not that I can think of. It starts with men. You know, in today's culture, that may sound bad. You know,
Yeah.
it shouldn't. You know, if men get it right, you've heard it before, everybody wins.
Right.
And that's meant to be a positive thing, right? If we're doing what we're supposed to, living the life that we're supposed to live, that God created us to live, the trickle down of that, we're going to impact our families, our marriages are going to be better. Again, our families, the church, the society.
Right.
So
That's
I think
kind of the big idea.
it is the big idea. Yeah. When men get it right, everybody wins. So,
That's
yeah.
cool. Cool.
Yep.
Well, great, Rob.
Thank you, sir.
You bet,
Appreciate
man.
it.
Thanks for coming out this morning. Appreciate you being with us. So Rob Leonard from Man in the Mirror Ministries. If you're involved in a church and you know your men's ministry is kind of maybe feeling like it's a little stagnant or something, look Rob up. I'll put the link to his ministry page in the comments below, and yeah, look him up. Rob's a great resource. He's been great for helping us walk through this process and discover what this means to build a discipleship-based ministry to men in our church. So that's all we have for you for today. Thanks a lot. Check the links down below. As always, we'll put the link for our pillows that we're doing in the comments below. If you or someone you know could benefit from the neck pillow that we're using, we'd love to help them out if we can. So check it out and click the link below. Comment, ask questions. I'm sure Rob will be happy to answer any questions on Facebook that you have.
Yep.
So that's all we have for you this morning. Have an awesome, awesome day. We love you guys. We're thinking about you. God bless and talk soon. And that's a wrap.